So I am not afraid to admit this morning to you that I would have to say, one of the most least musically gifted persons you will ever meet. Now, my glory days, I did sing in a boys' choir when I was about 11. But then puberty came, and my rather sweet, fine voice turned into something more coarse and less harmonious. I never sang in a choir again. Now, I did take guitar lessons for a season later in life, but found myself floundering with the guitar lessons when my teacher was teaching me scales, and I'm still not quite sure what that is, to be honest. Encouraging me just to play the scales. And I wanted, what I went to was so I could learn how to play the solo to Stairway to Heaven, right? And he wanted me to learn the finger placement on the chords. Get to the point where I could eventually just feel the music finally. Unfortunately, I think I've realized I am more of a thinker than a feeler. And I realized that you cannot really think yourself into harmony. If I might submit that. Now, it's not necessarily my lack of musical giftedness is not necessarily because I am tone deaf. You put me next to a strong singer, and eventually I can find the harmony with them after going up and down for a little while until I find my way to the same note, but at least I recognize that I am there. Just takes me a while. Now, Teresa and I would sing to our kids when they were babies, and now today sing to our grandkids. But lucky for us, babies are not music critics. They do seem to appreciate the effort, though. So I've always marveled, and I must admit, I've always marveled at those who can create harmony out of music. I grew up listening to music and loved music, loved the Beatles and Simon and Garfunkel, the harmonies they created. And yes, I even will admit today I loved ABBA. And I like to fantasize at times that if I was ever reincarnated, if there is such a thing, I'd be reincarnated as a singer who sang songs that made people feel joy or sadness. A person who could sing songs that would inspire people, help them feel the music. I'd be a rock star, but without the drugs and groupies, okay? So singing in harmony together is actually one of the central characteristics of the early church. You may not be aware of this. In fact, many of the people at the time, observers and critics of the early church, would have very negative things to say about these early followers of Jesus, but invariably a number of them would note how beautifully they sing together. If you think about it, the scriptures are filled with singing. The largest book in the Bible is what? Psalms, which is basically music for a choir. It's the largest book in the Bible and has directions for how they should be sung. And there's all kinds of interspersed throughout the Gospels and the early writings of the church, songs and hymns. The very opening of the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, was a song the early church sang. In harmony, I imagine. And Paul, whenever he wanted to make a really salient and meaningful point in his letters, he would often use a verse from a hymn that they all knew. There's nothing like singing harmony that connects us to something bigger, something deeper, something more profound than probably we realized. Now, I don't know about you, but it seems to me it's very hard to imagine, if not seemingly impossible, to imagine these days of living in harmony, right? We see the horrific tragedies unfolding in Ukraine and Gaza. They indicate anything but living in harmony. The angry and divisive words of our political season, political campaigns, are the opposite of trying to create harmony. It seems these days the discordant notes of disconnection divide us more than ever. And yet, Paul writes, live in harmony with one another. Now, Paul, in the previous 11 chapters that we kind of skipped over to get to the 12th chapter, Paul, in the previous 11 chapters of this letter to a beloved church, the bigger church, a church in Rome, described the amazing, beautiful music of God's grace embodied in Jesus the Christ, incarnated in Jesus. How God in Jesus gave this song of forgiveness and mercy so profound that it changes how we see the world and how we see each other. There was the law, Paul said, with its strictures, its rules, where the chords, they were the chords of the song you're supposed to learn to play, right? To follow along. Chords we're supposed to strive to learn, but it is really the song, the harmony, that is Christ. Christ is the harmony, Paul says, that brings us together. And so it is by this gift of God's love in Jesus Christ, unearned, unmerited, that we find, Paul says, our way to harmony. Over and over again, he emphasizes, I don't know if it jumped out at you as we read the text or as you read it up there, that in order to embrace grace, we have to let go of our egos, our self-centeredness, our self-importance. We don't save ourselves. God saves us. He says, in what we read this morning, don't think more highly of yourself than you ought to think, he writes. And then again, he says, do not be arrogant, but associate with the lowly. Do not claim to be wiser than you are. So in order to live in harmony, it's about, letting go of ourselves, our control, letting go of our thinking, and in the end, what happens is we just sing together, right? So I imagine, not that I have sung in a church choir, but living in harmony is like singing in a church choir, who we heard this morning, or even singing together as a congregation. Singing harmony is a point at which we let go of our own voices, and it melds and connects to something larger and bigger than ourselves. Harmony is feeling part of something more than ourselves. It is joining with the voices of God's grace in creation around us, in our neighbor, song of love more meaningful than we can imagine. And that may sound like something simple to do, and it's something we try to do on Sunday mornings. It's something we always seek to do, but living and singing in harmony is our secret weapon. It is our way of resisting the disharmony in the world. Paul ends the part we read. He says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good, Paul writes. And there's something here that seems rather radically impossible. So challenging to our efforts that we have to resist the pull of the anger and violence and divisiveness that is so much a characteristic of our world today. Paul wants us to overcome that anger, that violence, that divisiveness, not with more evil, not with more anger, not with more divisiveness. He wants us, as bizarre as this sounds, to sing in harmony. Many of you know, and I've probably quoted this, that one of my favorite all-time movies is Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Who's seen this movie? A few of you. I will warn you, it probably is R-rated. I probably would. So I always, whenever I recommend a movie, I tell people don't go watch it and say, why the heck would the preacher recommend watching this? But actually, it's an amazing movie and a lot of fun to watch. Very, very bizarre story, I promise you. But it's a story of the journey of a middle-aged Chinese immigrant, a woman named Evelyn. Now, Evelyn is the owner of a laundromat and is at a point in a crisis in her life. She's struggling with the IRS audit, and there's great disharmony in her family, disconnection between her and her father, her and her daughter, and in fact, profound disconnection between her and her husband. In fact, her and her husband, Waymond was his name, are very close to divorce, in part because she doesn't really respect him. He's too silly. He doesn't take things seriously enough. He's kind of lowly. He's kind of small. And in response to the challenges the family is facing, Waymond would do things like sing songs. Put googly eyes on everything. I told you it's a bizarre movie. Put googly eyes on everything around him. Laugh and express joy. And most of all, be kind. He seems unable to take things seriously. But through a series of adventures, again, bizarre, I would say, I warn you, she discovers a truth that transforms her. She finds out the truth that Waymond, in his own way, is fighting against cruelty, not with cruelty, but through his kindness, his singing. He's made the choice, he says, to be kind, see the good of others, and fight through the chaos with his empathy. He says his kindness is strategic and necessary in a chaotic world. His way of overcoming the chaos and divisiveness is to live in harmony with all around him. You are invited to resist the brokenness and chaos of the world by living in harmony with each other and with the world around us. To God be the glory this day and forevermore. Amen.